Hey everybody, today we're going to do some more Q&A. We've had some great questions pouring in and we want to address them one by one. This one comes from Jake Duncan in Eugene, Oregon. Dear Andrew, I've reached out to you once before thanking you for the great content you have created and shared in these podcasts. After listening to your latest episode on tea, I'm hoping you can shed some insight on a few concerns I have. Over the last year, I've become quite a tea enthusiast, exploring oolongs and pu'ers of many kind. I began my journey into tea seeking health benefits of antioxidants, digestion, etc., and became infatuated by the process, experience, and ritual of tea brewing. When I started out, I was very worried about pesticide use on tea leaves, but after some assurances from my main shop, JT in Eugene, Oregon, that they were tested or basically organic but uncertified, I just started focusing on enjoying my daily experience of tea and not stressing about how it was grown. Recently, some articles have surfaced on some of my online tea groups about Taiwan raising their restrictions on acceptable pesticide levels, and because of my Western perception of Chinese production, everything is covered in lead, I'm skeptical of their agricultural practices as well. What are your thoughts or experience of pesticide use on tea farms? Can I make any assumptions at all if I'm buying quality tea? Should I question my suppliers more before purchasing their tea? By the time the tea undergoes so many processes of withering, frying, fermenting, is the risk of pesticide residue a major worry? More and more, it seems, products and companies are sprouting up that are transparent about their practices and use clean, sustainable methods. Some I'm not disillusioned completely by the idea that something has to be organic to be good. But as a white guy who is still learning about tea, I'm struggling to understand what it's like in the countries the tea I love comes from. Any insight you have would be invaluable. Thank you for all your work. Absolutely. So here's the case. There is absolute garbage coming out of every country. So you can get tea coming out of China that's really cheap and it's not that great for you. It's garbage. I wouldn't touch it. You also have some of the purest, highest quality in the world that doesn't have the organic title, that maybe isn't tested in one way or another, and it's not even intended for export. It's used maybe for people within China, and they don't really care if it gets exported or not. You really have to know the supplier and know where it's coming from. Personally, we make sure that we have very good connections with the places we get our teas and herbs from. So that's why also we have, out of everybody who rates the podcast at the end of the year, we're going to fly one of you guys out to Sichuan so you can meet the tea farmers, the herb growers, and really get that personal connection with the people who are growing the tea. There are some very open, beautiful tea farms at the base of Omei Mountain and by Guanyin Mountain in Weiyuan, where they'd be happy to have you guys just come there and help them sort the tea leaves. It's all very open. It's very pure. It's very beautiful. And there are other places that are much more industrial. There may be a mountain by the side of a major city, and it's a little bit gross. So if you're purchasing based on price or based on packaging, I wouldn't use those as criteria. But if you know of a company, or really if it's a friend of a friend who is getting this tea very directly, then that's where my trust comes in personally. So we're having tea right now, just, in between questions, we take a break, we're sipping it. It's from friends of ours, and it's in the Tibetan region of Sichuan that they're growing this, in the Aba region. And it's great tea. We know the tea growers, they're on our Chinese social media. We can see videos of them sifting through the tea leaves every few days. They're always asking us if we like the quality, if the flavor is good, this kind of thing. Trust them completely. As to buying something online from an unknown company, personally, I don't, just because I like to have that personal connection to where it's coming from. Another aspect, when you look at the tea quality, you're often measuring for what shouldn't be there, but you're not always measuring for what should be. So I like to look at the entire environment. In Chinese, there's an expression, 水土, which means water and earth, and it means the entire environment is influencing that particular tea. So when we get tea or when we get herbs, I like to hike around in the entire area and just see how I'm feeling. Look at the wildlife, look at the plants, see how everything is thriving or not. And because that's really what you're taking in. It's not just the leaf. that leaf is an expression of its entire environment. So when we're having tea, when we're having Juyeqing tea, it's not just the tea leaves. There's the surrounding bamboo forest. You're really taking in that entire environment, and the essence of that environment is inside your cup of tea. So that's what we really like to take in. As to tea restrictions, I know that there are some hidden economics at work that favor British companies in India at the expense of Chinese. So one of the fears that British tea importers, exporters have is that China opens up its market to the world entirely. So they work with Western nations to change the criteria. It's a shifting goalpost kind of policy that the Chinese farmers, by the time they even hear about it, they can't really keep up with. However, the Chinese companies don't always care because they have such of a massive market by themselves. So there is some of the highest quality tea that you can find that you're not allowed to import into the US because of the shifting goalposts that are constantly in flux, that are largely controlled by British companies that are looking to secure their own export privileges by way of India. This is something I've talked to tea growers at the base of Omei Mountain. I've talked to tea growers from all over China, and that's what they say. They say, hey, look, we would love for Americans to have our highest quality tea, but because of different specifications that they can't quite jump through as nimbly as the people who are making the rules, then they have to settle for staying within the Chinese market or within the Japanese market. So just because the quality criteria has changed in Taiwan doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. Maybe they just don't care what the British are doing and they find that they have a much bigger market within mainland China. I think that's probably what's happening. As far as you getting your hands on some of this really high quality tea, we really didn't set out to sell tea, but what we can do is next time we go back to China, we can bring you back some. If you want to meet the people who are growing the tea, even if we do a little video or something, it would be good for you guys to see where good quality tea comes from. I have a number of friends who have tea plantations. They would really love to, expand their market as well for people who are discerning about quality. And for those people who really take the extra efforts to make sure everything is as pure and clean as possible, they like to know that there are people out there who appreciate their hard work. Our next question comes from Rudy. Wants to know about coffee for fat loss. So this is a message for you, Rudy. Generally, the bitter flavor is good for draining. It causes qi or Gaozi transmitters to rise in order to sink. It causes heart contractility, and it's best taken in winter. The reason for that is because it's going to increase circulation. In winter, it's very hard to get circulation. If you take something that increases the heart contractility, then you get this nice, warm, cozy feeling. It's like adding wood to the hearth and you start to stoke that fire. Coffee can potentially help with fat loss depending on the dose. Because of its bitter flavor, it can be a little harsh for some people's stomachs. In that case, it could potentially contribute to fat gain if it's causing digestion to not be smooth. Really, fat loss happens when your metabolism is working efficiently, and the hub of your metabolism is your GI function, your gut function. So for some people it's going to be very good, for some people not so much. There is a practice in East Asia of combining coffee with other herbs. I think this has a greater potential because some of the herbs can take away the harsh effects of the coffee on the gut. There are mushrooms or herbs like dongui which mix well with coffee. Some people add butter in the United States. This was a little bit shocking. I came back from China and people are adding sticks of butter to their coffee for health, whatever. But it's actually pretty similar to the yak butter tea that people drink in the Tibetan region of Sichuan and in Tibet. They add butter and salt to a really strong tea. So, give it a shot. Maybe it's fun. Maybe it's good for you. Either case, I think it's better to have warm drinks in the morning than to have a cold smoothie. If you do have a cold drink, it's better to add spices like ginger to kind of warm the gut because ice tends to cause the stomach and metabolism to slow down, and this can lead to fat gain. So is coffee good for fat loss? Yeah, maybe. Those are the criteria. There's not really an absolute answer with this. If your diet could use a little bit of bitter, then coffee may be a good way to go. If coffee hurts your stomach, then probably, stay away. The next question comes from Jason Gazdick from qigongvacations.org. He wanted to know about a specific herb that it was said to kill cancer cells, which we know is the dandelion. There is some research showing that this particular plant can help signal the natural death in cells, apoptosis. On the surface, this looks very exciting. It appears that the cure for cancer is in our front yard. So this is both true and untrue. The way that it's promoted as kind of the clickbait is, oh my god, look at what this can do. And that's true. However, that's not to say that the dandelion itself is enough to kill cancers. Dandelion is called pugongying in Chinese. It's used for detoxification formulas. And traditionally, it's not really enough to touch cancers, but it may be used within cancer formulas as kind of a helper. Herbs in this category tend to aid the natural cell death. Yes, it's helpful, but it's not the whole picture. What tends to work best is an integrated approach. So what they found is that, let's say that you have an herbal formula, traditional herbal formula for cancer, and its success rate is like 30%. And then you have the chemotherapy option. Let's say for this particular cancer, the success rate is, around 30% as well. When you put them together, you get a success rate of more like 70%. So they have a synergistic effect, and I'll explain in a moment how and why that is. Generally speaking, at this stage in time, you'll use the Chinese herbs to strengthen people in between the bouts of chemo. As a result of using this kind of integrated approach, it will generally double cancer survival rates. Now that doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to cure it or it'll be gone forever. So I'll give you an example. If somebody is given 3 years to live from their pancreatic cancer, they might get, 5. If it's a breast cancer and they're given 4 years to live, they may get 8. So it tends to work by helping to support the red blood cell, white blood cell production to come back faster in between bouts of radiation or chemotherapy so that people can endure more of these great attack strategies. So if we look at some of the classical botanicals that were used in ancient China, they were using venoms, they were using poisonous plants and mixing them into a botanical chemotherapy used specifically to attack. Now, why don't we use that today? Because it was much more volatile, and modern chemotherapy works much better as far as it being targeted. It's more specific. It's also easier to clean out of the system. So yes, there are natural ways to go about it, and yes, they also involve scorpions and they have their own problems. What they do in China is they take more of a customized approach, so they will tailor the herbal formula to the individual. What's often done more in Japan is they say, okay, you're going through chemotherapy, here's one particular formula that that's going to be used every time. And what they've done is they've done this since the 1950s and they've studied it. So in my experience, it might not be as perfectly customized, but at a utilitarian level, the benefit of the way they do it in Japan is that you can test over large populations and see how it's affecting people. There's one particular formula called Zhuzhen Taiho. In Chinese, it's Shichuan Dabu. There's a book on Amazon called Zhuzhen Taiho. It's I think it's just over $100, and it goes through 50 years of research on using this particular formula in conjunction with chemotherapy and radiation and what the tests have found. This is generally what I suggest people look into in the United States because those really high-level cancer doctors are very, very hard to find. I've studied with some of them, and it's a very, very difficult area of study, and I really doubt that you're going to find somebody outside of a major city in China who's really capable of doing a customized formula at that level. Not saying they don't exist, I'm saying they're going to be hard to find. So if you're not in one of these big cities in China, what I generally suggest is that people look at the more utilitarian Japanese approach for support strategies. And the reason for that is because you know exactly the pharmacology of how long it will stay in the body, how it binds to the chemo to remove it from the body. how it allows the chemo to do its work, there's a lot more information. And when you're taking an integrated approach, that research is really, really valuable. So, are dandelions useful? Sure. Are they going to save the day ultimately? Probably not. They're part of the whole picture. It's like having one Marine in a war. Is that Marine important? Absolutely. Is he or she part of the greater project? Absolutely. But can they win a war by themselves? It's very, very doubtful. Thanks so much for listening to Botanical Biohacking with Andrew Miles and Cho Shui-Lan. Remember, if you rate our podcast, Botanical Biohacking, on iTunes or Stitcher, take a screenshot of that and send it to us. We'll enter you in a monthly drawing and send you a particular herbal product that we ourselves use. Next month, it's on behalf of Enlighten Tea. Eric Manstoff will be giving away a packet of Enlighten Tea. This is Xiaoyao tea. It's very high quality, wonderful stuff. I drink it periodically. Then at the end of the year, we're going to select one name at random out of everyone who rates the show and sends it at botanicalbiohacking@gmail.com and send you a plane ticket to come with us to Sichuan, China, to come see the herb fields, come see how Chinese medicine is really done in the heartland of China.